All right, welcome back to another episode of Coffee with Ken. That's good, Joe. You know what I'm going to talk about today? I want to talk about raising money in real estate, but I want to talk about something really specific. I want to have a conversation with you about promissory notes. We're going to talk about what they are, why they are a horrible strategy for real estate investing, and why they could get you in a lot of trouble. All right, so listen, I want to just spend a few minutes and chat with you about it, and I decided to do this as part of the Coffee with Ken series because in this series, I want to help business owners to scale their businesses. And this is a topic that isn't directly related to building a business, but it's a very important topic in the real estate landscape today in North America because there is a storm coming. And it's a regulatory storm, and if you're not following the rules, raising money in real estate, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. Now, let me first off tell you a little bit about who I am. For those that maybe this is the first episode you're catching, my name is Ken Dunn. I'm a real estate developer. I'm developing major cottage resorts right across Canada. But I'm also, because I'm developing these resorts, I have been studying the compliance rules in Canada, the securities rules in Canada, because I'm raising significant amounts of money. We're talking tens of millions of dollars, and I wanted to make sure that I was following the rules. And if you're building a real estate portfolio at all, and you don't know what the rules are, you're gonna get yourself in a lot of trouble. And so I also know there's a lot of real estate coaches in Canada, and there's a lot of great ones, and there are some coaches that don't really understand the rules themselves, and they purport to, and they could get you in a lot of trouble. And here's the reality. If you're doing a real estate deal and you're taking advice for somebody else and somebody gives you bad advice, you're still the one that's culpable. You're the one that's going to get in trouble. So I'm also going to tell you that this video I'm doing right now is not me giving you financial advice. I'm sharing with you the things that I've learned from the advice I've gotten from my attorneys and the conversations I've had with the Ontario Securities Exchange Commission and the Alberta Securities Exchange Commission. But I think the onus is on you to make sure you're getting good counsel and good advice on these subjects. So first and foremost, let's start off by talking about this whole idea of other people's money. This is the catchphrase that most people are hearing all the time. And it has kind of been like the mainstay of real estate investing. And essentially, I mean, let's just be completely transparent with each other. If you take a look at any major real estate investor or the richest families in the world, they all have massive real estate holdings, and the vast majority of them have built their real estate portfolios without using any of their own money. They use loans, they raise money. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. And that's really what I want to talk to you about right now. If you're raising money in Canada, I think Canada could be one of the most strict countries in the world for raising money. And it's done for the right reasons. It's done to protect the people that are lending the money. And according to the securities laws in our country, anybody can lend money or invest money in real estate projects, but there are rules that they have to follow, and there are only certain circumstances that people can do this. I'll tell you really quickly what the laws are, and I want to spend most of our time talking about promissory notes because they are going away. And if you're using promissory notes in your real estate business right now, be careful. The securities people are coming for you. The law is coming. But before we talk about promissory notes, let's talk about some general rules and guidelines that we have in this country for fundraising. Firstly, anybody who raises money in this country for real estate projects has to have appropriate paperwork in place in order to raise the money. Now, the minimum paperwork requirement, documentation requirement, is what we call a term sheet, or is what's called a term sheet. A term sheet is a legal document. Most often, the smartest thing to do is actually get a securities attorney who does this for a living to write your term sheets for you. They're going to cost 15 to 20 grand to write when you do a real estate project. A term sheet is basically going to outline all of the details of the loan or the security offering. So it's going to talk all about what the project is, the financials of the project, your background, who you are, everything you could possibly imagine. And that term sheet has to be written, and it has to be written to a specific security standard. So you got to make sure that you're following the rules in the preparation of this term sheet. Once you have your term sheet created, you can start raising money. Now, if you create a term sheet, the Ontario Securities Exchange Commission says there's only one group of people you can raise money from. They're called accredited investors. Now, in case you've heard this term but didn't really know what it means before, an accredited investor is somebody who makes at least $250,000 a year in income, or between spouses, they make at least $300,000 in income, or they have $1 million in assets. Now, an asset, the definition of an asset does not include a primary residence, meaning that your $1 million can't include the equity of your house. So it's $1 million in other assets. So you can understand that's a pretty small group of people. But if you know enough people that have money and that would qualify as accredited investors, you're good to just write your term sheet. And this is for any real estate deal. This is the thing that people don't understand. If you're raising any money at all, if you're looking for a mortgage for a house from private lenders, anything, the term sheet are the mortgage commitments. So there's different ways that you can do this. But these rules are blanket rules. There's no exceptions to these. Well, there's 3 exceptions, and I'll talk about that in a second. So once you have you know what accredited investors are, then you have a term sheet. Now you can actually start raising money. You don't need to do anything else. But you got to be very careful, because every single person you raise money from, it's not enough just to say, hey, are you an accredited investor? This is what it is. You have to prove it. So to protect yourself, there are companies and businesses in this country that are called exempt market dealers. Exempt market dealers are people who are licensed by one of the regulators in one of the provinces. My company uses an exempt market dealer called Atlas One. They are regulated and they're licensed by the British Columbia Securities Exchange Commission to raise money. And that license is really important to them. If they lose it, they lose their whole business. So what I do when I'm raising money is I'll host a webinar and I'll explain what we're raising money for, and I'll have George there with me. He runs Atlas One. And then when people are interested, I'll get them to book a call with Atlas One's representatives. They're called dealer brokers, to actually make sure they're accredited investors and raise the money for me. I do pay a bit of a commission for that, but it's safer that way. Now, you don't have to do that. With a term sheet, you definitely could. I know that I could raise the money myself, and I have done that, but I find working with an exempt market dealer makes the whole process easier. Okay, let's talk about the next level down. So there are bigger groups of people that you can raise money with than just accredited investors. The securities law also say you could raise money from what's called eligible investors. Eligible investors are people that make $75,000 a year in income, or they have $400,000 in assets. So it has to be one or the other. You have to have one of those 2 things. If you want to raise money from eligible investors, then there's more documentation that you have to have prepared. The documentation is called an operating memorandum. Actually, there are a number of rules that you have to follow if you want to raise money from eligible investors. You have to create an operating memorandum. You have to provide audited financials for your company. And there's another of other hoops you have to jump through. But you can understand why they put more hoops in place, because you're raising money from a bigger group of people in the market. And if you're raising money from eligible investors, then you really need to use an exempt market dealer. That's just a little aside there, because the rules are so much bigger. And the process, I run a major mastermind group in Canada. It's called the Investors Growth Syndicate. And in the Investors Growth Syndicate, I help real estate investors to raise money. But I'm talking about the marketing side of it. I literally have an expertise in digital marketing and in real estate investing. And I've created very elaborate systems for raising money that allow me to automate it. So I run Facebook ads to a webinar. People sign up to come to the webinar. They show up live. George and I are on the webinar. We do the presentation. At the end, we invite people to book a call with George's team. And then once that works, we take the video, put it into an automated process. So this is happening around the clock, and we're booking appointments and raising money, and it's completely automated. So if anybody joins my group, the Investors Growth Syndicate, I will build that system for them. But I do not give financial advice. I do not give securities advice. I am not licensed to do that. So whenever somebody joins, building that marketing system, if you were to go out to anybody else, you're going to pay 50 grand to do that. I'll do it at a fraction of that price. If you join the syndicate, I'll do it for free if you join the syndicate. But before I'll even start building your marketing system, I'm going to ask you to show me your term sheet and tell me who your lawyers are that have given you advice on this. I want to make sure that you followed the rules, that you're doing this the right way. Because if I help you to build the marketing system and you start raising money, and then I find out later that you didn't follow the rules, I could be culpable for part of that because I helped you to do it. So I don't want to hurt myself or hurt our company and everything. And I want you to follow the rules. So this marketing system works, and that's how I've raised a lot of money. But I have a retainer with Castles, which is one of the leading securities law firms in Canada. Doug McCartney is our representative there. And Doug writes all of my term sheets, and he gets everything approved with the intermediary banks, Olympia Trust and Pacific Western Trust, for the collection of registered funds. He does all that. And then for raising the money, I take all my advice from Atlas One, from George Nast, an exempt market dealer. He tells me what I can say, what I can't say. He reviews all of our copy in our ads. He puts the disclaimers in our ads. He reviews all the videos that I do. He'll even review this video before I publish it. Because that's what we do to make sure that we stay on track and we stay legal. Now, one more thing I want to tell you. If you're using a term sheet and you're raising money from accredited investors, you do not have a requirement to tell the securities agencies up front. So Ontario Securities Exchange Commission, BC Securities Exchange, or Alberta, or wherever you're doing it. But when you raise the money, you're going to organize closings. A closing is when you've raised a specific amount of money and you want to take that money from the fundraisers, which in this case is Atlas One, from their trust accounts and put it to work. We actually have to do something called a closing or a filing. And that's the point where Atlas One is going to take a copy of our term sheet and a list of the people who gave the money and give it to the Ontario Securities Exchange Commission, the BC Securities, and all of the securities regulators, depending on where those people are that invested. That's called a closing. That's when you have to notify your Securities Exchange Commission if you're raising money through a term sheet and accredited investors. If you're raising money from eligible investors and you've built an operating memorandum, you have to send it to the securities agencies up front before you start. The OSC, the Alberta Securities Exchange Commission, and the BC Securities Exchange Commission are the three major commissions. And if you're doing an operating memorandum, you have to advise them and send it to them. Now, they're not going to tell you this is approved or not. They're not going to approve it, but you have to advise them that you're doing it. And if they see something in it that is way offside, they're going to tell you about it. But that's the way, that's the difference. That's why, like, I've even been criticized by some haters on social media that we're raising money with a term sheet and we haven't done a closing yet. Atlas One has all the money. And they're criticizing me, saying, we called the OSC and you don't have anything on file with them. No, we haven't done a closing yet. They don't know any better, and they think I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's kind of a little fun cat and mouse game that's going on. But I assure everybody that sees this video, my company is following the rules. And you can hear even by this conversation, I kind of know what the rules are. Now, before I talk, I want to finish by talking about promissory notes. But before I talk about promissory notes, I want to talk about exemptions to the rules. So I've outlined for you my understanding. Again, this is not financial advice. This is not securities advice. If you're going to do this yourself, start by getting a great lawyer. I love Castles. They're a major law firm. They're right across Canada. They're willing to take you on. Invest in getting a relationship set up with Castles. Let them do this work for you. Get an amazing exempt market dealer. George Nast and his team at Atlas One, I believe they're one of the best in Canada, and they're looking for new clients. So if you want help, Google them. I'll put the link to Castle's website and Atlas One's website. I'll also put the links to the three security commissions websites in this episode so you can understand it. Now, all the laws in Canada do say there's an exemption. And that exemption means, the securities laws say that you have to either use accredited investors or eligible investors, but there is an exemption. And that exemption is, it's people you know. And so the laws say that if you have family or really dear friends or business associates that you've been in business relationship for a long time, they're exempt from the rules and they don't have to be accredited or eligible investors because they're familiar with you. The problem is because that exemption exists, there are a lot of people that are shirking the rules and claiming that all the money they're raising is from those groups of people, and that's just impossible. There are definitions for friends, family, and eligible investors, and loosely speaking, my understanding is that somebody whose family has to be a blood relation that you know. Somebody that's a friend is somebody that's been a friend for multiple years, you dine with, you have a friendship with, you go on vacations with. You got to prove this stuff. And business associates are people you actually really know and you do things with them, like going on vacations. If you're a coach in Canada and you're running a coaching community and you got a bunch of people in your coaching community, that's not a business relationship. So you got to make sure you know what those rules are for those exemptions, because if you ever get in trouble, what's going to happen is somebody's going to complain about you to the OSC. The OSC, they're really smart people, or the Securities Exchange Commissions, they're incredibly smart people. When somebody complains about you, they know that there's a lot of frivolous complaints in this space, but the onus is on them. They still have to inquire with you and ask you to respond. And I've had this happen, and I've passed with flying colors because I'm following all the rules. So you have to give them real clear answers, and in your answers, you got to prove to them that you're following these rules and you know what you're talking about. So when my reply, I said, yeah, I work with Castles, I work with Atlas One, we're following these rules, we know what these rules are, here's our exemption criteria, everything was fine. But the point is, to you, a little bit of information is dangerous, right? So I'm telling you this whole thing basically just to prove to you I know what I'm talking about. I'm not giving you advice at all. I'm telling you clearly, if you're raising money and you haven't spent time on the Ontario Securities Exchange website and you don't have a relationship with a great law firm like Castles, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. Believe me, they're coming. They're going to get you. Now, the other thing I want to talk to you is about mortgages, getting a mortgage on a house, getting private mortgages if you're doing house flips. The rules still apply. And I didn't even realize this when I started doing house flips years ago. What I mean by that is if I'm going to go out and raise money, borrow money for a mortgage, a first, a second, a third, whatever it is, I have to make sure those people are accredited. There's an exception to the rule in that regard. If it's a mortgage, you can use a FSRA licensed mortgage broker. All mortgage brokers in Canada, mortgage agents in Canada, have to go through licensing. And if you're a mortgage agent, you work for a broker, you have to be a mortgage agent level 2 to do mortgages. That certification is giving those mortgage people a limited ability to give advice. And so if you're raising money for real estate deals and you're looking for private money, unless you know what you're really talking about, use an accredited mortgage agent. We even have a mortgage agent that works with our company to do all of our real estate deals because the mortgage agents are protected by national rules called the FSRA rules, and I think it stands for financial, I don't know what it is, but you can figure it out. So all of that stuff covered. Now, here's the last thing, and this is the part I know many coaches in Canada that are teaching people to use promissory notes, and they're saying this is the backbone of what you're doing. Promissory notes are going to start getting shut down. The securities regulators in this country are seeing that most of the problems where people are losing money have to do with the people being convinced to lend the money through a promissory note. What a promissory note is, an unsecured contract between two individuals where one person is lending the money and the other person promises to pay the money back with interest. The problem with a promissory note is that promissory note is not secured by real estate. It's not secured by anything at all. So if they fail to give that money back to you, you have very little recourse for getting that money back. But these promissory notes have been heavily promoted in some coaching communities. There's another video on my YouTube channel that I'll also put in the notes here that I want you to watch. Several months ago, we did a real estate investor summit in Calgary, Alberta. And during that summit, we had a panel discussion where Doug McCartney joined me on stage with Dwight Martin from Axiom. They're a mutual fund trust company. I'll put their link in the chat as well. And we talked through the rules. I want you to listen to what a real securities attorney said about promissory notes in this country. It's scary. And if you don't understand that and protect yourself against promissory notes and get away from using them, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. The regulators are going to shut this down. It is the worst part. What happens most often when somebody is raising money through a promissory note, they don't even check to see if they're accredited investors. There's no term sheet. So right away, they're breaking the rules. Then they say they're using the friends and family exemption, but they're not really friends and family. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why promissory notes are going to get you in a lot of trouble. Wow, this ended up being a deep coffee conversation, didn't it? Raising money for real estate can be really easy. And I've raised tens of millions of dollars. It's easy for me because I have the right partners. I have the right lawyers giving me advice. I have the right exempt market dealer that's guiding every step I make and reviewing everything that I do. And then I have the digital marketing strategies to get people looking at our offer and then turn it over to George. So it's become really easy for me. And I can help you in that end with the marketing. If you'd like to know more about our Investors Growth Syndicate program, I'm going to put a link to another YouTube video where I talk all about it. If you want to learn more from Doug McCartney and his thoughts on promissory notes and raising money, I'll put a link to that panel discussion. I'll put links to all the securities agencies in here. And I hope that in some way I'm helping you through this process.